the short bio that I put together. Short, this is the short bio. Born in Jefferson City, is a licensed physician and is certified by the American Board of Pathology in anatomic pathology, neuropathology, and forensic pathology. She received a Doctor of Medicine degree from St. Louis University School of Medicine. She completed residencies in both pathology and neuropathology and was a postdoctoral fellow in the National Institute of Neurological Disease and Stroke, all within the St. Louis University School of Medicine. She has served as the Chief Medical Examiner for St. Charles, Jefferson, Franklin, and St. Louis counties for many years. I mean, we're very lucky to have her in this particular position. Dr. Case has authored and co-authored a lengthy list of medical journal articles, reports, and book chapters in her fields of expertise. She has lectured extensively for professional organizations throughout the United States, as well as internationally, and for community groups. Her driving passion has been to serve the community by being at the forefront of notifying the proper law enforcement of public health authorities of deaths that have been caused by violence, hazard, and infectious disease. She has dedicated her career to the accurate determination of cause and manner of death for those particular agencies, law enforcement agencies, which includes the identification of murderers and the exoneration of the innocent. And let me say to you, many of you know I worked in the criminal justice system for years in the prosecuting attorney's office. One should never think that Dr. Case only testified for the state. She testified for the side that she thought was right, even if it was the defense. Okay, I think think about that. A lot can be said for that. She is one of the few forensic neuropathologists in the nation, and she is a leader in the field of forensic pathology and was instrumental in establishing teaching programs in in-depth investigation. And one last personal thing. As an advocate in the prosecutor's office, I had the death-related cases, meaning I would help the victims whose husbands, children, whoever were killed, and someone was arrested and prosecuted. Part of my job was to know what this woman was going to say and what kind of pictures she would have, because if it was horrible autopsy pictures, just imagine, you would never want to see your son, your husband, in that kind of state. So I would say usually when Dr. Case goes into the door, into the courtroom, why don't you leave? And people would say, no, I want to put my head down and I won't look. Well, heads would pop up, and once you see it, is it here forever? So she would have some really hard things that she would have to talk about. But we had a murder case that she had nothing to do with that was solved because of DNA. And our DNA expert, Dan Fonstock with the St. Charles County Lab, is a fabulous guy and is well-versed on DNA. And the defense attorney was well-versed on DNA. And Dan and this attorney were having what seemed to all of the rest of us in the courtroom a private conversation because we didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Okay? DNA gets very complicated at times. You will never see that with Dr. Case. She explains things at a level that anyone sitting in the court would understand exactly what she's talking about. And that is a gift, and that is an art. And for that and all kinds of other reasons, we are so lucky to have Dr. Mary Case here in St. Charles County.
Well, I am delighted to be here to see all of you, lots of old friends and some new friends, and thank you, Joni, very much for that introduction. Am I on?
You are.
Okay. So, by the way, I am a new member of the Historical Society. What I'm going to talk about today is the history of the medical examiner system in this country, and then we'll talk about here in St. Charles, and a little bit about what it is the medical examiner does. And so, let's go next. If we have time, I will show a case. Talk about a case, an old case. I will not show any dead bodies. I promise you that. So because of our technology here, I'm going to have to kind of look there. So if I'm not looking at you, don't think that I'm not aware of you. So the coroner system is what our medical examiner system came from. And it came from Great Britain, from the UK. And they had a coroner system there 600 years before we did. I think we have missed a couple of, is this the first slide?
No, you just passed the slide. You have another slide.
Yeah, let's,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, go to the next, yeah, okay. So the coroner system first can be documented in the English literature somewhere around 925, and it was formally described in 1194. The word coroner comes from the word crowner. So the crown had an interest in knowing why people died, but also in maybe getting their property. If you committed suicide, the crown would take those properties. So the coroner is the one that would regulate that. So our system came over with the early colonists back in the 1600s. There's evidence that autopsies were being done as early as 1647 in Massachusetts. The earliest teaching in jurisprudence was Benjamin Rush, and I'm sure this group is aware of him. He is a member of the Provincial Congress in 1776, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, so you're all familiar with him. And interestingly, in 1792, he wrote an article opposing capital punishment. So even then, there were ideas against capital punishment because it certainly existed. The earliest mention of a coroner, which is a lay individual, not a doctor, but the earliest mention of a coroner using a physician to help him figure out some of his death cases was around 1860 in Maryland. In 1868, the state of Maryland authorized the governor to appoint a physician as the coroner in Baltimore. So that physician now was a step up from having a lay coroner. In 1877 in Boston, the Commonwealth of the state, they adopted a statewide system that required the coroner to be replaced by a physician, and it was known as the medical examiner. So the first time that term came into usage was back then. In 1890 in Baltimore, the Board of Health mandated that two physicians, and they gave them the title of medical examiner, that they were to perform any autopsies that needed to be done by the coroner or by the state's attorney. Next. So the first real development of a medical examiner system that was kind of fleshed out and had rules and regulation began in 1915 in New York City. At that time, they eliminated the coroner office and established a medical examiner system. And they authorized certain investigations. The types of deaths were laid out. So the jurisdiction would include deaths resulting from criminal violence, causalities that would be accidents, suicides, deaths that were not attended by a physician, people that were imprisoned, and any suspicious or unusual manner. And the medical examiner had the authority to autopsy these individuals and to do the testing that was necessary. The first chief medical examiner in New York City was Charles Norris. And then this is the third medical examiner, the father of modern medical examiner. He began in 1954, and he retired about 1973, and he died in 77. At that time, I was an early person in forensic pathology. I existed at that time as a medical examiner. And I remember Dr. Halpern. I saw him one time, and he died at one of our meetings in California. He was in San Diego at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences when he actually died. But he is considered one of our top leaders. Interestingly, he convinced the city of New York back in the 50s to build the building that is going to be a modern facility and house the medical examiner's office and what they call the Institute of Forensic Medicine. In New York City, right next to Bellevue Hospital, it's kind of on 26th and 1st, there is the medical examiner's office, and there are three buildings. The third building is a biological building that was built during the 9/11 situation, so that they would have, it was all DNA. There's an entire, it's like 16 stories now. So that building is entirely for biological specimens. The New York City Medical Examiner's Office was also the cradle of forensic toxicology. A man by the name of Alexander Gettler established the laboratory branch. Next. The first statewide medical examiner system was in Maryland beginning in 1939, and it used the New York system where they had a variety of policies that they would follow. All of their activities were documented in law, the kinds of cases they would be investigating. And basically it was a broad spectrum of cases, and it provided for autopsies and toxicology. There was also a unique method for appointing the medical examiner. Prior to this, medical examiners were usually appointed by a political figure, which is not what you really want, because then when that political figure gets mad at you, he just dumps you out. So forensic pathologists and medical examiners should be appointed for their credentials, for their qualifications. So this was done for the first time. In Maryland, they had two professors. They had professors of pathology from a couple of the medical schools. They had some people from the health department and from the state and the state police. So these people could look at somebody's credentials and decide whether that person was suitable to be the medical examiner. So let's talk about what forensic pathology is. So let's start with pathology. Pathology is a specialty in medicine. You don't go to a pathologist. They exist in hospitals where they do the laboratory testing of your blood and urine. There's a lot of other laboratory things that go on that you are not aware of. It's very, very sophisticated. That's clinical pathology. Surgical and anatomical pathology deals with parts of the body. For example, if you have a biopsy, you have an organ taken out, we just can't let the surgeons take out things without somebody looking at them, and that person is the pathologist. So pathology basically means the study of disease and injury. So in the hospital, it's a consultant to other physicians. Forensic pathology is the utilization of the knowledge of pathology to the resolution of legal issues. And you can apply any science to the forensic area. Engineering, all of the sciences can be applied in legal ways to resolve legal issues. The teaching of forensic pathology kind of began at Harvard in 1937. They established a chair of legal medicine. They had a man by the name of Alan Moritz as the first professor. And he also created a training program to teach forensic fellows. And I'm going to tell you in a little bit how you get to be a forensic pathologist, but we do that in a part of the training we call a fellowship. So he established a fellowship training. He also established seminars for teaching how to recognize homicides and various kinds of death for people that were involved in the police and criminal investigation. Harvard closed their department in 1967, but transferred all of the teaching of the forensic science part over to Maryland. They have a very big, fine state medical examiners system. So it was around this time that other cities and states began improving the laws that regulate how medical examiners and coroners come into being. So, next. So, how do you get to be a forensic pathologist? A number of people here ask me about that. So basically, you go to college, and then you go to medical school, and then you do a residency in pathology. So when doctors do their specialized training, it's after medical school and what we call a residency. So for pathology, that is 4 or 5 years. And that is followed then by what we call a fellowship, and that's a farther specialization. And so there's 1 year of that fellowship training for forensic pathology. In this country, there are 37 training programs we call where we can train these fellows, and St. Louis University has one of those training programs. The first board certification in forensic pathology was in 1959, and between 1959 and 2004, 989 people were certified. About 25 to 30 people a year complete fellowship, so there's not a lot of forensic pathologists. Only about 400 practice at any given time, and we need about 800 or 900. So there's a lot of jobs. I encourage anybody with young people to go into this. So where does the medical examiner system fit in? It's a strange little orphan. The best place for it to fit is as a part of public health. And in St. Louis County, that is where, as the chief medical examiner, we exist within the health department. We have a separate building, but I am in the Department of Health. And that is the proper place for forensic pathology and medical examiner work, because we are very much public health. And I'm going to explain how that is. Sometimes the medical examiner system exists in an academic setting within a medical school. The city of St. Louis has a separate medical examiner system, you know, from St. Louis County. They are two different counties. So the city has a contract with St. Louis University to provide professional services. That means doctors that are forensic pathologists go down to the city and do the cases, and they provide the toxicology. The building, the maintenance, the other people that work in the system, those are all city employees. So the contract is only for professional services. Sometimes the medical examiner is a standalone system under the county executive. In Kansas City, Jackson County is such a system. It stands alone. It's not part of anything else. It's right under the county executive. St. Charles is the same way, and I'm going to talk specifically a little bit more about St. Charles in just a minute, and we'll talk about that. Where you don't want to be is with public safety, the law enforcement. We don't want to be a part of them because we have to investigate them. Whenever there is a jail death or interaction with the police officers, death in custody, that is a very serious thing, and there's going to be all kinds of accusations. So we don't want to be under jurisdiction of public safety or law enforcement. And very few are. There's a few places in California that have that relationship. And in Georgia, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has a medical examiner system that is used for the small towns and areas that are outside of larger medical examiner systems. And they have been successful in being independent, but you really want to be independent from law enforcement. Medical examiners are part of Homeland Security, and we're recognized as first responders, although we're the last ones to get there. And the response that we're going to have is not one you want to get. So I'll tell you this. The only federal medical examiner system is the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System, which is an interesting thing that you've probably never heard of, but it exists. In Dover, Delaware, there is a very large facility that has a morgue that is very, very modern, and this is where all the troops from any kind of war, they are flown directly to Dover, and autopsies are done by the Armed Forces Medical Examiner. These are men and women both, a number of women. They are in the military, and they do the examinations there, and it's very sophisticated. It's a wonderful opportunity for anybody to start out as a young forensic pathologist in the armed forces, because that training is very intense. So they study how people die in the wars, and they are looking at trying to provide better armament, body armor, how to prevent the blast injuries. There's a lot of blast injuries. So there's a lot of research that comes out of that. And every day when a military member leaves that facility, they're in a coffin and they are dressed in the uniform of their service branch. And everybody in the building comes out and stands at attention and salutes as those ambulances take the bodies away. It's a very moving situation to see. Those same medical examiners they have to deploy, as I always say, we can't even have a house plant because I never know if I'm going to come home tonight. You may be in Afghanistan tomorrow doing autopsies, not on anybody killed that is American troop, but there are things that they do over there. They also go around the country if there's a military plane crash or there's a death on any military installation, although lots of times they will let the local medical examiner do those cases. I've done any number of military plane crashes from Lambert. There's not like a whole lot of them, but over the years, I've been around for a long time, I've done a few. So let me mention the DMOR. So what we call the Disaster Mortuary Response Team. This is a pretty interesting thing, and you may be seeing some of this happening down in Florida with the condo collapse. So this was started by funeral directors that got together and they were trying to provide kind of help to anybody that was having a disaster. And it was taken over by FEMA after 9/11. So now it's a very regulated thing. And what it does, it provides forensic pathologists and mortuary support to any jurisdiction in the country and any of our, like Puerto Rico, where if you have a hurricane or a flood or a plane crash and your system is overwhelmed, there are forensic pathologists that don't work directly for DMART, but they will be on a list. And so it's like, well, here, Puerto Rico's having a hurricane, I need 5 forensic pathologists to go for a week. And so they will send 5 down there, and if they don't get done, then more come in. And so a lot of the younger members of my profession, they'll sign up for DMART, and when they can be available, they'll be deployed somewhere to do autopsies on those individuals. And always a big part of it is identification. So we see that, we had them in Joplin when we had the tornado down there. So how does the coroner medical examiner system, how do we get that system? What laws regulate that? Well, in every state there is a statute that establishes jurisdiction over certain classes of dead bodies that are of interest to public health and public safety. Our statute is 58 at 720. Coroners are in this state, and they are lay individuals. Some people are very surprised as to what a coroner is. So a coroner is 21 years of age, you get elected from the county in which you reside, and there you go. No other qualifications. Once you get elected, there's a little bit of education, and all of a sudden you're in charge of determining how people die. So that's not a really good system, but it is, this, you know, the coroners exist along with it. So medical examiners are forensic pathologists. Next. So in 21 states, there are pure medical examiner systems. 11 states have coroner systems. 4 of those, the coroner has to be a physician, but doesn't have to be a forensic pathologist. Kansas, Michigan, Ohio, I forget what the 4th one is. So there are 11 coroner states. And then there are 18 states that have mixed systems. Missouri and Illinois have a mixture. In the state of Missouri, if you have a population under 150,000, you're usually a coroner state, or a coroner county. Everything is on a county basis. So in the larger areas, you have a medical examiner. So St. Louis City, St. Louis County, Jackson County in Kansas City, those are medical examiner systems. Boone County and Callaway have joined together, and they have a medical examiner system in Columbia. Greene County has a medical examiner system, but they've never been able to hire a medical examiner. So you know what they do? Somebody from elsewhere flies in every week. Somebody comes in for 3 days, does cases, and then goes home. Because there's just so few of us. I'm trying to get somebody down in Texas to fly in a few days a month for me. You know, we do what we have to do. Let's see, so Greene County has an ME, and so those are the medical examiner systems in the state of Missouri. In Illinois, they have a medical examiner system up in Chicago, of course, but everything else is a coroner. Their coroners are much better equipped. They have a better situation than our coroners. In the state of Missouri, our coroners make like $5,000 a year. So they have to have another job. And unfortunately, 60% of them are funeral directors. And that's very much a conflict of interest, because they're going to be determining whether or not an autopsy should be done. And if you're trying to get the funeral, the family may not want it, and so you might say, well, I don't need to autopsy your body. So this is very much a conflict of interest. In the state of Missouri, we've had a blind coroner. We had a tow truck driver that said, well, I'm going to go to the scene to pick up the car. I might as well get the body. In Illinois, their coroners have a better educational background. They make a living wage, so they can do it. And particularly in counties like Madison and St. Clair, they run almost like a medical examiner system. And by the way, their budgets are more than St. Charles, and we are much bigger. We're twice as big, And I don't know how they get away with this, but I mean, everybody in the office has a car. Like, we have one car in St. Louis County, and I'm talking about for the death investigators. So it's like, wow, how do you get away with that? But anyway, the coroners over there, for example, they come to St. Louis University where we have a death investigators course, and it's in their law that they have to go and have that training that we give them. In Arkansas, those coroners have to come to St. Louis University and take this death investigation course. That's not true in Missouri. They provide their own training, which is not really very good. And I'm not speaking badly about them because it is the system we have, and we're not going to get rid of it because they are political entities and they have constituency and they're there to stay. Okay, so just to give you an idea of modern medical examiner systems, when did they come about? Chicago, Chicago became an ME in 75, so it's not like 100 years old. San Diego in 84, St. Louis County in 1969, the city in 77, and St. Charles in 1981. Next. So in 1981, St. Charles, if you look at the population, it's really interesting. Today, it's like, who knows how many people are in St. Charles County? We have no idea. It's somewhere over 400,000. It's growing so fast you can't count it. But in 1980, it was 149. So now they've become a medical examiner system. And the first medical examiner was a Dr. Jack Way. He was an emergency room physician at St. Joe's. And then the second one was Mike Knoyer, one of my neighbors, and he was an ENT doctor. Both of those people were doing this as a public service. They didn't want to do this work, but what was going on is before, when it was a coroner system, Doc Mueller, a chiropractor, was the coroner. So Doc Mueller continued in the medical examiner's office, and it continued just like a coroner office, except they had a doctor who would sign the death certificate. So in 1986, I met with Mike Knoyer, and I said, well, how would you like to get rid of that job and have a whole system here? And he said, I would support you in that attempt. And we were able to get that, and in that time there was a 3-judge commission, and so we were able to create a medical examiner system in St. Charles. And I became the first medical examiner that was a forensic pathologist. So at that time, I was a full-time tenured faculty member at St. Louis University. I had been on the faculty since I finished my residency in '73, and I stayed there until 2017. So that was part of my life. I was also working as an assistant medical examiner in St. Louis County. I began that in 1975. So I go way back. Nobody else in this country is as old as me doing what I do. And I love it. And I can run circles around most of those people. So at any rate, and I, knock on wood, I'm thankful for that. So the way that we set up our system to have a medical examiner system, nothing existed, so we had to create it. So at St. Louis University, we have a division of forensic pathology. And basically what that division does is education. We do death investigator courses. In 1978, we instituted this, what we call the basic death investigator course. And it's a week-long course, 8 hours a day. And people are talking about how you die and how to investigate it and what it looks like. I gave lectures on blunt trauma, child abuse, head injury, and alcohol. And other people we all gave multiple lectures. And so by the end of that week, you had a really good idea of how people could die and how you would investigate it. So we did that 3 times a year, and it is still ongoing. And then every other year, we would do a master's course, and it was 4 days long. And we would bring in an outside faculty, and they would talk about things that were going on around the country. For example, after the Oklahoma City bombing, the medical examiner came in and talked about how they worked all of that activity, what it looked like. And I don't mean, no, they don't show bodies necessarily, but they said, here are the problems that we have, and this is what you need to do, this is what you need to be aware of. For example, things that people don't know. They have these cadaver dogs that are looking for bodies. Well, this is what's going on in Florida. After about 3 days, there's no live people, and now they're all, decomposing bodies, and the dogs would get so depressed that they took turns letting the dogs find a living person.